Hi there, Kalos here. Last weekend I went X-2 at MCS Week 10, and unfortunately I bubbled. The bubble this week was harsh. That said, I did want to showcase two replays on my channel, as I feel they best illustrate my approach to the Ishizu tier mirror match, both going first and going second. So let's get started. In this first replay versus the mirror match, I have lost a coin toss, so I am going second. My opponent has opened Scream, Dragon Ravine, Rhino, Siren, and Maxi. And I opened Diviner, Halfness, Siren, Kelbeck, and Scream. So I have two forms of interruption, Halfness and Kelbeck. My opponent has essentially opened up full combo. Let's see how they play their turn out. Now, my opponent mills double DD Crow and Called By off the Scream, and then sends a Halfness with Rhino. The Halfness is triggered to make a Kid Kalos, and they elect to use the Tearlament that's currently in their hand. An interesting choice. Kit then searches Merly, and my opponent activates Dragon Ravine, discarding the Max C in order to dump the Strudo from their deck. The issue with this play is that by doing it now, you sort of play really hard into Kelbeck. And playing into Kelbeck is something that you want to be aware of while you're playing the mirror. It's not the strongest going second card, it isn't the best point of interaction, but when it hits hard. And in this particular case, putting back the Kid Kalos is going to drastically impact my opponent's ability to play, because the final card in their hand is Merly, and they've already normal summoned. I believe that what my opponent was trying to accomplish with this play was making a Ancient Fairy Dragon before they ran the risk of milling the Perla Rhino from their deck. A choice that I understand, but it just played very hard into Kelbeck. Now, I chose not to use Halfness on the first effective Kid Kalos. I would much rather wait to use the Halfness on Kit's effect to to send the card from graveyard and special summon itself. That way, once we start milling, we're locked into only trigger effects. The Ancient Fairy Dragon is a pretty cool tech. It is a way to turbo out Planet, and having Perla Rhino does give you an advantage, but it is heavy on the resources, and it does give me an opportunity to use my own Halfness. Now with my Halfness, I hit another Halfness and two Ash Blossoms, so I will get a fusion out of it. With my Kid Kalos, I have a few choices. I could add a card to my hand for follow-up, or I can try to extend further and get into more fusions. I deliberated on this choice for a while and decided that I wanted to continue to extend on my opponent's turn. But then the question becomes, what do I send? Do I send one of the names that I haven't fused with yet, or do I send a Rhino Heart? Sending Rhino Heart does a few things. It gets the Siren out of my hand, and it lets me fuse with that Siren. It also can have the Rhino Heart stay on field. If you notice, I already have a Kelbeck on my field, and I can now get a Rhino Heart on my field as well. Starting your turn off with two level 4s is really strong when playing the mirror match, because you're able to immediately threaten Dweller. So that's what I like to do. Now, I actually choose not to use the Tearlament name that I sent with Rhino Heart, and in that sense, there wasn't really a need for me to activate the Rhino Heart. The reason why I'm not using it is because I don't have enough Tearlaments either in my graveyard, field, or hand to get into another meaningful fusion. So I'll just keep the Rule Kalos on field, and I sent them early because sometimes it's nice to have them early in the graveyard, you know? It opens up elf lines. I negate the effect with Siren here, even though they have not used Siren's fusion effect yet. I think it's going to be much more detrimental for me to let them mill, because right now my opponent doesn't have that much in their graveyard. In fact, they don't have a loaded graveyard at all. They don't have any shufflers. Letting that Siren resolve can open up their graveyard and include some extra shufflers. I don't want that to happen. So I'll just let them get the fusion and trade the mills. Instead of using Kit's effect to summon out Merly, they use AFD's effect to summon out Merly. This was a questionable choice because it meant that they missed out on 5 possible mills they could have had. They also don't activate the Agido. Probably a smart choice, given the fact that I am playing Tearlament, but you have to think of it like this. I've already activated 2 fusion effects this turn, as well as Rhino Heart. There aren't a lot of live mills left in my deck. The only thing you're afraid of giving your opponent is a shuffler. So to that end, I could say, sure, I respect the thought process of not giving me a shuffler, but not using Kit to summon out the Merly from your hand just lost you 5 mills. So the turn swaps over to me and I draw a Mudora, which is a little dead right now. But I have 2 level 4s on board, and my opponent has no way of stopping me from getting to Dweller. They do not have any shufflers to trigger their planet, and even if they do hit shufflers off of the Scream, I'll be able to chain Dweller to the effective Scream on summon, meaning that everything in their graveyard will be completely out of commission. So that's what I'll do. This opens up a Dweller Zeus line. My opponent's Scream mills were also inconsequential. The only thing I was afraid of was a shuffler for the following turns. Now, I could have normal summoned Diviner and activated its effect, sending a miller to my deck from deck to graveyard, and then had both of us mill 5. Since my opponent is under Dweller, that mill 5 is favorable to me. However, I could miss. And if I miss, I'm left with a level 6 Diviner and a Zeus, both of which are lights. And I'm unable to do anything with it, and the Scream in my hand would be dead. By normal summoning Diviner and not activating the effect, I actually open myself up to do a elf play, summoning the Merly that I sent way back with Rhino Heart in turn 1, and now I can get a mill 6. This way, even if that mill 6 completely whiffs, at the very least I have a live Scream for my opponent's turn. I am able to hit a name as well as a Sulliek and a Nagito. I choose not to activate the Agido as I'm vastly ahead of my opponent right now, and giving them mills, even though they're under Dweller, would open up their plays for next turn. So even after watching my opponent go almost full combo and with only a Halfness and a Kelbeck in hand, I was able to completely out the board and set up my own board of Kaleido, Rule Kalos, Scream, Set Sulliek, and Elf, which has the ability to reborn a Diviner, which can then dump a Mudora, and now I'll have 2 Shufflers, one of each in my graveyard. There's no coming back from this with 1 card. So now let's go over a game where I do win the coin toss and see how I sequence my combo to beat the mirror match. My opponent opens Sulliek, Perlarino, Tactics, Agido, and Mudora. I open Maxi, Ash, Siren, Planet, and Imperm. A fairly strong hand on my part, made even stronger by the fact that our opponent has no form of interaction. So what are my goals for this line? Now, obviously, I'm trying to get to my fusions, and ideally, I'm trying to set up a Dweller. So, generally speaking, in the TCG, it's better to start your turn off with Siren, because that way, when you do play into Halfness, there's a chance that you'll be able to mill a Shuffler, and then you'll have an answer for whatever your opponent mills off of their Halfness. However, in Master Duel, Halfness is at 2 and Max C is at 3. Every deck has Max C, not every deck has Halfness. Therefore, in Master Duel, it is actually more correct to sequence your turn to play around Max C than it is to play around Halfness. For this reason, I start with normal summon Rhinoheart. I make Kit, and with Kit, I search Merly. Kit effect target herself, special summon Merly, mill 8. I hit a Merly, a Sulliek, a Scream, a DD Crow, and a Diviner. I really could not have asked for better mills than that. As well as a Rhino, in case I do want to make Kaleido Heart. I go ahead and I trigger all 4, Merly, Rhino, Sulliek, and Scream. I search Crime with the Scream. I search a Halfness with the Sulliek. Rhino special summons itself by sending the Siren, and then I fuse into Rule Kalos. The Siren that the Rhino Heart sent is able to now make a Mud Dragon with the DD Crow that I milled, and I've already activated the effect of Rhino Heart this turn, so it doesn't do anything on field. Now, I have 2 level 4s on board. I could make Dweller, Rule Kalos, Crime, Imperm, and Pass, and that's going to be really good. But what I want to show is that you don't need Dweller to win the mirror, and I want to stress that a lot. You do not need Floodgates to beat the mirror match. You need to establish follow-up, you need to establish control of the graveyard, and you need to make your pushes efficient. To that end, I think it's going to be more beneficial for me to link off the Rhino Heart and the Merly. The Rhino Heart will get banished for Sprite Elf, reborn the Diviner in my graveyard, use its effect to Foolish the second Shuffler, because I have a Keldo, so I could Foolish a Mudora, and now I have one of each Shuffler, and then Synchro the Mud Dragon and the Diviner for a Baron. Our opponent activated a Agido here, likely in an attempt to put a level 4 body on the field to start his own turn off. It's not a bad effort, but because we're synchroing into Baron, we're able to just pop the Agido, and the fairies don't trigger when they're sent from field to the graveyard. I set Imperm and Crime and Pass. So what have I established here? I have Rule Kalos, Elf, which has a possibility of targeting either a Diviner or a Merly, depending on what the situation calls for, a Baron, which is an Omni Negate, an Imperm, and Crime, which is a second Omni Negate, as well as Planet, Ash, Maxi, and Halfness. and one of each shuffler in the graveyard. I did not make Dweller. I did not have to make Dweller. This board plays around virtually everything. You cannot get super polyed with this board. You cannot get evenly matched with this board. You would need 3 copies of evenly matched. If my opponent kaijus over my Rule Kalos and Elf, I can still get into my tier names by using Halfness. And they still have to deal with Baron, and the Imperm, and the Shufflers. This is a lot to chew through, and it doesn't require Dweller. So I activate Max C and draw phase because if my opponent has a way to out the Max C, I'll be able to negate it with Baron. Then during the standby phase, since Baron negated something, I can tag Baron out and put something more useful on the field. Normally, I don't like to preemptively Max C like this. I'm not doing it to play around talents. The reason I'm doing it is because I have already established all of the follow-up I need to win the game on the next turn. Using Maxi now applies the pressure to my opponent that if you do not crack this board, you will lose next turn. Plain and simple. Imperm on the Elf, I see as a little bit of a bait to get me to play into talents, which is fair. I was always playing into talents anyway with this hand, but at the time I didn't know it. So I decided there's a possibility that my opponent is sitting on a talents that they really need to resolve. Why give them the opportunity to use it? That said, I still do have 2 Omnis. So activation of Perla Rhino is going to get met with a Baron negate. That's pretty worthwhile, as this is a one-of. It can only be activated once per turn, and destroying it means that I'm the only one that has an access to the field spell. Normal summoning the Mudora here was pretty smart, as it means that when I do inevitably crime the tactics and send the tier from my hand to the graveyard, they're going to be able to use their shuffler on the tier I sent. That said, with 1 card left in hand, it's not going to be enough. And there my opponent realizes that it's over. Hopefully this game shows you that you do not need cards like Dweller going first. You don't have to make Dweller every single time. You don't need a floodgate like Dark Law. You can win the mirror match by setting up very strong boards, control of the graveyard, good use of hand traps, good use of your back row. So, thank you so much for watching my replay analysis. I hope you learned a little bit about how to play Ishizu Tearlament, how to address the mirror both when you're going first and second, and more importantly, how to win the mirror, as well as what interactions to play around when you are comboing in order to ensure that your opponent isn't able to get the maximum value out of their engine cards against you. And despite the fact that I bubbled this week, I intend to come back next week stronger than ever, hopefully make top cut then, and get my second ring. And before I forget, I'd just like to take this opportunity to plug my Twitch channel. I've had a lot of fun streaming, and it's where you can go to get even more content from me, okay? So, thank you so much everybody for watching. Have a great night. I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.